Greetings, thanks for joining me. Fred in Alaska, of course. It's like -10 and a little windy, and I don't want to be out there. It's cold as shit. Got dogs flapping ears and probably be getting in my face annoying, but we'll see how it works out. Oh, now Tank's drinking water. Yeah, that's why I record out in my Tahoe. Anyway, so what I wanted to share with you today comes from a couple gentlemen. They wanted to remain anonymous, so I'll just call them the sightseers, the tourists. These two gentlemen, they had a friend of theirs out of Juneau loan them a boat, and what they did is they spent a week traveling around Juneau to all the different fjords, all the different glaciers, and they ended up over by Bell Island Hotsprings, which is an abandoned resort down in southeast Alaska. When they were pulling into the bay there was a couple kayakers on their way out, waved hi, all that, nicey nice stuff. And one of the kayakers said, sound like a lady screaming over there, but we couldn't see anything. And they said, okay, they kept that in mind or whatever, and the people continued on. Well, it was getting on into dusk. This was late summer. It still, land of the midnight sun. However, once you get past June 21st, you start losing daylight incrementally. So by mid-July, let's say, you're getting, 5 hours of darkness a night, something like that. Well, this was after 10 p.m. when they came into this little harbor, this little bay where this abandoned resort is. So according to let's just call him Michael, because he's the one that reached out. So we'll just call one of the gentlemen Michael. He said that they decided, because it was a nice, quiet harbor, they were going to anchor out. They did so, and they were enjoying some, a couple cold brews sitting on this boat. Just kind of, as the tide was moving in and out, they would kind of swing around, and they were just kind of in their own little world, enjoying it. He said just as it was getting on into almost dark, that's when they heard a scream. And he said it was loud. It was piercing. It hurt their ears. He guesstimated it was within 300 yards of where they were, behind the resort from where they were out in the bay, somewhere up on this hillside. Now, they didn't know. They were like, okay, they yell out, hey, if you need help, say something, but dead quiet, not a noise. They heard a couple float planes off in the distance over this course of time, but no one was immediately around them. They did pass a couple people further on out that were camping out towards the point or something along those lines. I tried to look it up, but which point? There's so many different little spits and stuff. But anyway, they were the only two there, is my point. So as they were sitting there, the stern happened to be facing the resort, and they just had an open view, and it's getting dark. The scream happens, and from what Michael said, something changed in the air. It went from jovial, enjoying a cold beer with your buddy, to all of a sudden something felt ominous, and they heard another shorter scream, and then they saw movement, but they saw it right at the tree line behind this place, and they could not make out what it was. But he said it was dark. Whatever it was dark at that point, because they hadn't really been able to pinpoint who or what this thing was moving. He said they sat there and watched this thing, and it went on right along the tree line and out of sight. And they said, well, that was really weird. He said it looked like it was walking on 2 feet initially, but they could not tell for sure. And they weren't going looking. They drank some beers. They're anchored out. They're not messing with nothing. They got safety by distance, and they're out in the water. So as they're sitting there discussing, what the hell it could be or whatever, they have some pretty big spotlights on this boat. but the boat has to be powered on, otherwise it'll drain the batteries quicker or whatever. So just keep that in mind. So they're sitting there and they hear the scream again, and then they're hearing this smacking sound, this bap 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 bap. He said it was this thing running back across just into the open, just outside of the trees, and they heard its feet smacking the ground, plap 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 plap. He said it was a real weird sound, like it was smacking into muddy grass or something. And so they could barely make out this dark figure moving across. And they're like, damn, what the hell is this? So they sat there curious, talking about what it could be. And the buddy he was with was like, well, that's obviously a Bigfoot. And Michael was like, I never seen a Bigfoot. That's just hokey crap, right? Well, as they sat there, they drank a couple more beers. It was quiet for a while. Then they heard the scream again, and they heard splashing in water. And they could tell it was somewhere between them and shore just by the sheer sound of it. Forgive the smoke. I got an incense burning because my dogs stink. Huh, Tank, you're stinky. Anyway, so they decide, okay, let's fire up the boat and spotlight over there, because whatever this is sounds like it's coming out towards the boat. So they fire up. They have to watch their line and stuff, and they get the boat turned around, and they beam the two little spotlights they had, and each one is controlled by one of those little arms like the cop cars, So he's operating one, and his buddy's operating one, and Michael said he was beaming over towards the abandoned resort, just kind of checking around that tree line, and his friend was aiming down at the water towards where the shoreline is. And he said his friend started freaking out, actually stumbled back, fell off the boat, immediately climbed right back into the boat, and was yelling, it's right over there, it's right over there. And Michael's confused because he's tending to his friend, helping him get in the boat because he's wet, laughing at him like, what the hell are you doing? And his friend was panicked. Michael said he's been buddies with this guy for 20-something years, never seen him that pale and freaked out. And his friend's pointing, it's right over there in the water. So Michael's beaming around. He sees nothing. It's kind of going back and forth. And about 25 feet away from the boat, he catches eye shine, and this thing's looking at him, doing this weird kind of swimming motion. It's coming at the boat. And so he starts freaking out immediately because they didn't have no guns or nothing. They had a flare gun, and that was it. And so immediately he's like, pull the anchor. And his friend was, Michael didn't even have to say that because his friend is already initiating the little drive motor to winch in the anchor or whatever. Well, as they're doing this, it's pulling them closer to this thing. So they're in a conundrum. So what Michael says is, stop pulling us in, because at this point it's literally 20 feet away roughly in the water, and they hear it making this weird noise. He said he couldn't even put it into words. He said it sounded like a sea lion, right? And had he not seen its face, he would have assumed it was a sea lion coming over because of the noises it was making. And I've heard sea lions, they can sound like a brown bear. They're big. So what he does is he puts the boat in reverse and drags the anchor, and he gains them a 40-foot distance or so, right? Again, his friend starts wheeling in that anchor, and from what Michael said, he was really concerned that this thing was actively pursuing them, even though it was doing this weird swim. It was dark, so he couldn't really make it out, but he said its head was bobbing a lot, had red eye shine, the face looked black, the eyes looked black, and with the big spotlight, he could see it clearly. He said the hair was kind of matted, looked like Neanderthal in the face, had big brow ridge, real wide set jaw, and looked like block teeth when it was taking breaths and stuff as it was doing this weird head bobbing kind of swim thing. He couldn't make it out because it was dark, but he said it was real odd looking the way it was moving. And he said it wasn't moving fast, but it was moving, and it was coming towards them. So as his buddy's reeling in this anchor, he sits there and goes, oh, because right there hanging, on part of the awning on the rear of the boat was this pouch that said flare gun, right? So he unzips it, pulls it out, pops one in, and goes, I'm gonna fire this flare not at it but up in the air and see if that brightness will distract it, scare it away or whatever. So he does that. Boom, he fires that thing off. He said it was a lackluster flare because he said it must have went 50 feet up in the air, kind of got bright, and then kind of just went right on down into the water, which obviously it was a dud round. So there was only 4. There was one that was loose, and there's 3 others in this little holder, and so he pops one of those out, and he's distracted by doing this, so he's not really paying attention. Well, his friend reeling in the anchor gets it in and comes back around from the bow and is saying, hey, let's go. And of course Michael said he was clearly not paying attention. Well, during the course of all this, shooting it up and it fizzling out and him being distracted doing this thing was basically, one hand was feeling around up on the skid or on their boat trying to find a place to grab on, right? His friend put it in reverse. They backed up, he said about maybe another 40 yards until he told his friend, stop, you're gonna run aground, because the way they were backing up was not how you wanted to do it. Plus it was dark and they had no real good way to see except these beams. And with what was going on, Michael had him stop, pull forward a little bit further out into this little bay, and he starts beaming back, and they see it at that point when they stopped to beam back and look. He said it was probably between 60 and 80 yards from them and was obviously heading back away from them. He said they puttered out further. They got into about 20-ish feet deep of water, something like that, and decided, because they were going from calm water into more choppy water and it was dark out, and they were not the master navigators, you know what I mean? So they decided to drop anchor there. He said they weren't pursued any further after that. They weren't nothing was done other than noises, and they heard screams throughout the night. He said up until first light there was a scream. He said maybe once every hour to 2 hours depending, and they varied in intensity and loudness. He said it was one of the scariest moments when he didn't even realize this thing had covered that distance while he was dicking around with this frickin' flare gun. And luckily his buddy was paying attention, because he said when he noticed, he saw the big hand and felt the boat kind of tilt a little bit just as his friend hit it into reverse. Damn lucky. Where do you run? When you're on a boat, where do you run? Jeez, that would be that'd be some freaky stuff. I want to thank Michael for sharing that experience. This happened not quite 10 years ago, and I want to thank him for reaching out. He's in the medical field. He's a doctor, and he was very insistent that his name not be used because he's still practicing and all that kind of stuff. And I told him I wasn't going to use the name. If I did, I'd make it up. So he's Michael. I want to thank him for reaching out. This is yet another person who reached out because of a subscriber to the channel got a hold of them because of what they've shared in the past, and I want to thank that subscriber for that. I sincerely appreciate it. A lot of these things go untold. A lot of these stories go untold. Michael said that had he not been prompted and checked out the channel and saw how many other people were having different experiences up here, he said he probably would have just took that to the grave. His friend wouldn't even talk about it after that night. He tried to bring it up, socially, like, hey, remember that crazy night, Bell Island, Hotsprings, and his friend would just be like, it was a beautiful place, and would not elaborate on what they dealt with. That would be some shit, man, to be in that conundrum. I'm not laughing. I'm mentally picturing having this winching in of this anchor, and it's pulling you towards the danger. It just, that just would not be a fun evening. I want to thank Michael for sharing. I will be back on Night Dreams Talk Radio this Friday. I'll post a flyer at the beginning, or check out the website. There'll be a flyer there. What else was there? Nothing offhand. The sun just rose, and it's after 11. Sunrise technically is at 10, but with the mountains, it doesn't peak up until between 11 and noon. But anyway, it's just Alaska shit. Thank you guys for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next one.